Welcome into this episode of How to Ride a Roller Coaster. I'm David Ezell, and today I'm joined by Riggs Eckelberry. He's the founder and CEO of OriginClear, which is transforming the water industry one startup at a time. How's it going?
Well, in fact, we're having an amazing time with the startup we're working on. Back in January, we announced a letter of intent to merge it with. I'm not going to get technical, but there's these blank check companies on the NASDAQ that are founded just to acquire companies. You know, they have a bundle of money.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we signed a letter of intent to merge this startup of ours, Water on Demand. And I unfortunately can't comment further than that one LOI, but I can tell you it's exciting.
That's fantastic. So let's start right there with Water on Demand. Before we dive into your background, how you got to where that is, let's tell us a little bit more about what's going on right now.
Right. So I'll have to just back up a little bit because so I was in high tech for just a couple of decades. And when I finally felt I could be a CEO, the backers that I went to said, well, fine, but it's not going to be in tech. It's going to be in algae, green.
Interesting.
And all of a sudden I was in the algae industry as a CEO of a small public company. And it was amazing. It was fantastic. I was on all the big shows, And Stuart Varney called me, I'll call you Algae Man, all that fun stuff, which was great, except that algae collapsed when the price of oil collapsed below $50, and we had to pivot. And, we can talk more about this whole pivoting thing that I think is critical. But we got in the water industry and we found that it could not change. The water industry was not amenable to change. Like this big governmental installation that does everything for you and everything will be fine, except it wasn't fine.
Yeah.
We know water infrastructure in this country and all over the world is a mess. Only 20% of all sewage in the world is ever treated. The rest is dumped. Now, it's a bit better in the US, but not much. So we have a lot of bad news. And a lot of people assume it's fine. So it took us a long time to start to move the needle. And in 2015, we acquired a company, which is now our McKinney Operations Center, Progressive Water. That was great. Give us good client base and so forth. 2016, I fell in love with decentralized water. There was a seminal Lux Research webinar that basically said it's a thing that increasingly, because of overloaded infrastructure, business, industry and agriculture is doing their own thing, self-reliance. They're treating their own water, whether it's a housing development or a farm or a car dealership or an RV campground, whatever, they're doing their own water treatment. And we realized that, hey, this is the solution to the underfunded infrastructure in America, which is take the load off. Don't have it do as much. And industry and agriculture treat 90%. They use 90% of all water, right? So let's not worry about the 10%. Let's worry about the 90%. Get them off the system. And I'll be telling you about Water on Demand, which makes it attractive for them. And then the 10%, which is the true audience for the local utility, gets treated right. Ireland water is free. Why isn't it free here? Because you have industry and agriculture basically hogging the system and making it expensive for everyone. Get them off the grid, relieve it. Now the people can have clean water, inexpensive or free.
I would have never put that number at 20%. That just blows my mind. Had you asked me that, especially here, like you mentioned, other parts of the world, sure, I could maybe see it at 20, but I would have at least put, the U.S. maybe 50 to 60%. But I mean, knowing that number is so low,
that's fair. And
it definitely feels like something's off.
It is better in the U.S., but for example, look at in the Carolinas, you've got all those poultry farms that are just dumping nitrates in the river. In Florida, you've got a lot of outflows that sewage outflows, for example, that are creating algae, toxic algae in Lake Okeechobee and places like that. There's a lot of problems. And also, think about this. We have antiquated sewer lines, so they break and they start to leak into the groundwater, the aquifer, and now it pollutes that, right? Nobody can dig a well and drink the water out of that well. You have to sanitize it and filter it. It's not clean. Wow. What does that say? It's like pretty horrendous.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about the water on demand. Is that individualized, or how does that kind of work?
Okay, so first of all, as I say, we're targeting industry and agriculture because that's the 90% users. And there's two challenges. The first one is technology. You got to take that big utility scale stuff down to the corner of a brewery, which is going to be 150 square feet.
Yeah.
And we have that. We created a company in 2018 called Modular Water Systems, and it, as the word says, basically these are water systems in a box, highly standardized, assembly line. Okay, you want one? Boom, we'll get you one quickly, and that has proven to be extremely successful, and it's growing. But then we ran into the other thing, and this really, we were growing all this up until COVID hit, and then when COVID hit, I was like, uh-oh, big reset.
Yeah.
We didn't know in February of 2020 that there would be a bailout, right? The CARES Act, all that stuff.
Sure.
We went, oops, there's going to be a problem. So people are going to be capital starved. And that's when we came up with the other part of it, which is you want a water system and you're a brewery. You don't have $1 million for a water system. You make beer, right? So just sign here. We'll deliver a machine. It remains ours. And we bill you on the meter just like you're accustomed to.
Interesting.
And they go, okay.
Like, yeah.
Right? And that brings us to the third part, which is how are these machines funded? Well, we made it possible for regular everyday investors to come in and invest in these bundles of water systems, much like an oil well partnership, these master limited partnerships that are a big success.
Yeah.
We're doing it for water. So we like to say water like an oil well.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. So are you guys national right now? I know that, like you said, a lot of it is here in North Texas and kind of that McKinney area, but are you guys national now?
We are. We're doing it now. So we're doing there's a set of initials, DBOO, design, build, own, operate. We do the D&B right now. In other words, we do the conventional, we'll sell it to you, and we'll maintain it. The water on demand concept moves us into OO, where we own and operate it. And we're just, you don't even worry about it. We take care of everything, we maintain it, and we just charge you on the meter. That is the big next phase, because water as a service is coming. It's the natural thing. It's why make people have big capital expenses when they can just essentially pay for their usage?
Riggs, I have to ask, what is the mindset for all of this? Going back to where you started this and it all first kind of came from, what was that kind of shift like whenever you dove into this industry?
Well, I think it's got to come back a little bit to my background, because early on, and this was really a factor of the tech industry, but even before that, I have a very experimental mindset. And so rather than over-intellectualize things like, okay, take this, throw it out there and see if it works, right? And then be nimble enough to go, okay, let me adjust it. Let me tweak it, tweak, right? And so I have this saying, invite the unexpected. You want to invite the unexpected, because how you're going to succeed is in this market, you're not going to succeed by being the same as everyone else.
Right.
You're going to have a special sauce. In our case, we were looking to differentiate ourselves from every other water company out there, because the water industry grows very, very slowly. 10, 15% growth a year is considered great. And this is why the big water companies, they do a lot of acquisition, because that's how they get their numbers up. They just keep buying companies.
Yeah.
American Water Works has $1 billion a year M&A budget. And so, it's easy for them to just buy $10, $100 million companies, right?
Sure. Keep it clear.
Right? Keep it simple. And so you have this very static water industry. So how do we break out of it? And because we were already a public company and we were developing things, we turned what was a liability, which is we were burning money and getting investors into an asset, which is, hey, we do a great job of bringing in investors. Let's put them into these capital resources and create eventually a generational asset for them.
Interesting.
Because they're going into a royalty type situation that goes on as long as that fund continues.
It's fabulous. And so that's where you guys are now. That's kind of the shift after the first part has been kind of launched. That's the shift now.
Right. So modular water systems is a success. First, the Progressive Water entity in McKinney has been doing a great job all along, but in 2022 they took a big leap, and almost doubled their numbers, which is a lot for water. And so did modular water. So they both just kind of took off.
Wow.
And as a result, we found ourselves with great performance. And now we're combining those two with this brand new idea of the pay per gallon, right? The water on demand pay per gallon. Here's the thing that we know that investors like you and me, we're people who do pretty well. And we have a little bit of cash, and well, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
You got to put it in, an S&P 500. I don't believe that stuff anymore.
Index funds until you finish. Yeah.
Or crypto. Oh my
right.
God. Oh Lord. I don't want to know. Well, it's been great for capital losses. Let's put it that way.
That's it.
So a lot of people are going, well, how do I get an edge? And we know that getting in early on something is good. But, if you look at the Airbnb, if you look up the Airbnb rounds, you can look it up on the internet, it was all insiders until the IPO.
Yeah.
And so how do you become an insider? So we crafted, it's like, you know what? The water industry is it's exploding, it's breaking out of the monopoly. Let's open it up to regular people. So we have this saying, water is the people's asset, both for consumption, but also for investment. Somebody made a prediction that the first trillionaire is going to be in water. We said, no. We want 1 million millionaires, not 1 trillionaire.
Right.
Let's democratize this thing. Let's have some fun. And for some reason, the elite has not really caught on. It's just beginning. There was a unicorn in May that had all the kind of wonderful, fund support and so forth. But it's didn't explode yet the way AI did, right? I mean,
right.
We have the time to do it and do it right, and to have an innovative model that is going to resonate, and then we can start cloning it beyond America.
And I think that's such a fascinating segue to kind of jump into, because I think a lot of times people that are in that position, like ourselves, where how do you become somebody that can get in from the ground floor? How can you get in early with something that, 99% of people just don't know? You don't know about those early rounds with Airbnb or Uber or any of those types of companies. Those happen almost in a silo, in a vacuum away from our vision. So this is amazing. And I think that there's so much opportunity for it, because I keep going back to that 20% number. The need is so large, so the opportunity is so great. So, like I said, I love what you guys are doing.
Well, and think about it. Let's take a look at India, where there's a real problem. India is a wonderful subcontinent. It's coming up in the world, but their water infrastructure sucks.
Yeah.
They just basically don't have it. They got people in the sewers who are dying from the sewer gases. They're literally shoveling this stuff. So, what do they do? Well, they're not going to – who's going to come up with $500 billion or whatever? That's a huge, huge country.
Yeah.
Well, why not just have decentralized from day one, where it's self-reliant pods, both in industry, in farms, in housing developments, eventually individual homes. It makes a whole lot more sense. And then you have a small municipality to supply the fresh water. The treated water gets recycled, and then they can dump it into the aquifer to recharge it, and everybody's happy. So that's a model that we need to learn from. Let's take a look back home here at Miami-Dade County. It was built without any urban planning back in the day. And so there's about over 100,000 septic tanks in the county. And they fail, they leak, they're literally, because the water level is rising, or maybe the ground's subsiding, I don't know
right.
which, but whatever. It's literally these septic systems are coming in contact with the aquifer, and it's a real problem. It's a real, the sanitary issue. So the county is going, okay, let's spend billions and connect sewage to every single one of these things. Well, number one, It's supposed to be 6 billion. It'll be 10, 12 by the
Sure.
time they're done. Secondly, it'll tear up streets for 20 years. Why not just give a rebate to those septic owners to put in one of those self-reliant systems that are mature by now, and the poop goes into a sludge tank that gets emptied out once a year by a truck, and that's it. It's done. But here's the problem. The county, Miami-Dade County, is not thinking that way. They like sewage. They like pipes. They like to raise a lot of money and have the big plant. But that doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
So here's our approach. We're not talking to Miami-Dade County. We don't talk to late adopters. I learned that in high tech. You talk to the early adopters. You talk to the people who really, really need it. They're being fined, or as we see in North Texas, they're building a housing development that's 20 miles from the local sewage plant, so that's impossible. So they need a self-contained thing. So they know they need it. You don't have to market it to them. They know, I got to have this thing.
Right.
It's a flying J in the middle of the country on a freeway. Yeah. No connection to anything. It needs its own sewage connection. RV campgrounds, mobile home parks, all that stuff. So the first generation for us is the users that are forced to be self-reliant. And we don't go to, there's a wonderful, wonderful book called Inside the Tornado. And it describes the high-tech life cycle, right? The high-tech life cycle always starts with, I call it the nose of the armadillo, because right there at the beginning is the super early adopters, the people who actually used the Newton PDA back in the day.
Right.
Those people, right? They just do it because it's new. And that gets you in there. But you start progressing along the snout of the armadillo, now you get to what's called the strategic buyers, who are buying something for a good, valid, competitive reason, or they're legally being fined or whatever. After that, there's something called the chasm, which is something you have to leap over to get wide adoption. And that is how do you get there? Well, at the bottom of this, as it starts rising up, the very bottom of it, something called, this guy calls it the bowling alley, where you create a bunch of applications and a bunch of users, and after a while you get critical mass, and boom, it takes off. All of a sudden you have a tornado of adoption, right? Now, that's very common in high tech. It happened with, back in the 80s when I had a computer company in New York City, we saw two competitors show up for big enterprise databases. One was called Ingress, and one was called Oracle. And Oracle did not work. Ingress worked great. Well, guess who survived? Oracle. Why? Because Larry Ellison was smart enough to go for the adoption.
Interesting.
And the users are like, well, it doesn't work too well, but everybody's buying it, so it'll get worked out. It'll get figured out. Whereas Ingress is like, we will not ship anything if it does not work, and they're not German. I'm not. That was not a German thing. I was just saying that they had this conservative attitude, right? And as a result, you've got to go for the velocity. When there's a tornado of adoption, then it's a matter of how many seats can you get, how fast.
Yeah.
It's market share. It's no longer about proving the technology, but it's about who has the momentum. And then at the top of that curve, the back end of it is the conservative guys and the skeptics. And you don't market to them. Why? Because they'll follow.
Yeah.
They'll follow the trend, right? So people say to me, oh, why don't you go get a grant from Tallahassee? I'm like, nope, not going there. I'm not doing it. Because they'll put me through the ringer and they'll give the deal to their golfing buddy anyway. So no thanks. We deal with users that are desperate. And I think that's the key, in entrepreneurship is find the where's the real demand, and don't rest until you have it. It's too easy to just go, okay, this is good. I'm making, environmental test kits, but nobody's buying environmental test kits, but I'm making environmental test kits,
right.
You got to find the traction. And that's, I think, the key.
Is there anything that you kind of tell yourself, maybe when an opportunity presents itself, so you know exactly who your early adopters are, who that target audience that you're going for is, But let's say that something, as you're going down that highway, there is an exit, and all of a sudden somebody who you're not marketing to and is not one of your target customers says, we want it, and it just kind of becomes another opportunity. Do you say no to that? Do you entertain that? Or do you stay focused on what you know that your target audience is, and you keep driving that direction?
Well, okay, it depends if it's we get a lot of this over the transom, which is, hey, if you meet with so-and-so, he controls tribal lands in Oklahoma, and he can get you in with the tribal people. And then there's this grant program with the U.S. Department of Interior that there's millions available, and if you work on it for 5 years, you're going to get there. Like, no, thank you. But if there's a situation where, like this happened to us in the trailer park space, we were not in trailer parks, mobile home parks. But we know that this is a big problem because there's tens of thousands of them, and mostly the old school way of sanitizing your black water, as they call it. You know what black water is, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, it goes into a pond, and it's called passive treatment, meaning you do nothing. And that's that green pond on the side of the road. That's the pond that's got all the poop coming from the mobile home park. Well, state environmental protection agencies started to like, okay, wait a minute, you can't go on with this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. So they started putting pressure on the mobile home parks. And it just so happened that we had an opportunity that somebody actually knew personally was stuck with a mobile home park and was being fined by the Alabama Department of Environmental Protection. And so we got into it. It's a good thing they were a good friend of ours, because it was so hard learning how to make it work, because it's a very nasty, these ponds are mostly sediment and a little bit of water, and your pumps get clogged and this and that and the other thing. We got there, we solved it, they ended up happy, and then we started selling more of these because we were in the space. So yes, it's important to recognize opportunities. At the same time, you don't want to have too many of these at the same time, because that particular project lost us money. We made sure they got the result, but we spent more than they paid us. And, that's the cost of the learning experience. But don't have 12 of these going on at the same time. It's going to kill you. So fortunately, that was going on okay. And then we got into housing developments, and that has just blown up, especially in Texas. We're also dealing with a lot of the freeway rest stops, the trucker stops, because they tend to be isolated.
Right.
We're servicing them, RV campgrounds, interesting niches like that.
Okay.
And it's fine. It's totally fine to develop a business like that. And then we're also starting to do small cities. So a city of 50,000 or 100,000 people, our systems don't get very big, but they're big enough for that. And that has proven to be very successful. One of the things we pride ourselves on is that 60% of our projects are basis of design, meaning that the client selected our design and therefore cannot go to anybody else except us.
Interesting.
Like, we want that design. And boom, at that point, it's just a matter of us not committing an unforced error, because we have no competitor at that point. So
Gotcha.
I think that, we go through an entrepreneurship, we go through a phase of being generic. I'm selling plumbing services, or I'm selling on Amazon, or whatever it is. But over time, you want to get to where you are unique. That, I think, is what we're all aiming for, so that you first of all, the margins are typically higher. I have a nephew who does very well on Amazon with psoriasis creams, and he's moved beyond having the private label lab do it for him. He's
Wow.
now doing it. So over time, you move into that phase of really controlling your supply chain, and doing more of it yourself. A good friend of mine sold his Amazon business. There was that big roll up that occurred in the last 2-3 years, And by the way, the roll-ups are having a hard time because guess what? Those individual Amazon businesses are doing well because the entrepreneur paid so much attention, right?
So focused.
And you can't just, aggregate them all and make them work.
Yeah.
So they're learning the hard way. But anyway, he had a good exit. And now he's starting a fresh venture where he's going more supply chain. He's doing stuff much earlier in the supply chain, right? As opposed to just buying product from China. And part of that, of course, is this amazing deglobalization trend that's happening. It's a thing, reshoring as we call it, is that industry is moving back to North America. And there's a very good geopolitical strategist called Peter Zeihan. He was on, if anybody wants to listen to him, he was on Joe Rogan a couple months ago. But he says, look, here's what's going to happen. As industry moves back, it's going to create a huge boom in America from building all those manufacturing plants and having a supply chain that's not 5,000 miles away, it's 200 miles away, right, in Mexico or whatever. So he says that after next 5 years is going to be tough, but then there's going to be 20 years of incredible prosperity for the North American region. Now, hard times for China, hard times for other places, no question. But deglobalization will favor North America. And that's something to think about when you go, well, what am I going to do? Well, there's going to be a need. Those factories are going to be built modern, automated, minimal labor. That's how they'll be competitive in this market, especially since Mexico already has a shortage of skilled labor today, right now, because it's already happening.
Right.
And so in our case, we're already planning to make sure that every one of those factories has integrated water treatment, because there won't be the facilities. It'll be in the middle of Mexico or South Texas or whatever, and there won't be the facilities. So self-reliant water treatment, integrated water treatment is the thing of the future. And there's all kinds of good reasons for it.
So what does the timeline on one of these pods look like? Like if you started one, what does that timeline look like from soup to nuts?
I mean, like one of the modular water system.
Right.
Well, today, this is one of the reasons why we are looking forward to a potential eventually getting onto a national exchange. Again, I can't talk much about that.
Sure.
But is to give us the capital to accumulate inventory, because we have a standardized product line. So there's, what do you want? 5,000 gallons per day, 10,000, 15,000, 20, 25,000. That's it. Boom. 5 choices. And it's either above the ground container on a pad, or it's on foundations in the ground. Those are your 2 choices. Thank you very much. And so we can build ahead. Today, however, it's going to take 90, 120 days to get it to you, because we build everything. We take care of the permitting. We build the whole system. It's complete. It shows up on a semi, dropped in. Here's what's cool. The site only has to have a regular facilities manager or janitor. It does not have to have a water expert, which is key, because when you're putting it in a housing development, you're not going to have a water expert. You're going to have you're going to have a really cool guy or gal that does the facilities management, and they just need to do the routine. So it's faster than the industry standard, but it's not as fast as it's going to be.
Gotcha. And so I would imagine as you're building OriginClear, especially to the point it is now, but also especially looking to the future, you had to put together a team that understood what the goal is, understood what the vision is. You've done a fantastic job of explaining the problems, where you're going, all of that just right here. But what has that process been like as you've assembled that team and you've kind of thrown out that North Star of, this is where we're going to go. This is the rocket ship we're building. We're adding seats, but once it gets going, we need people that are focused on that direction. How was that process as you were building and as you continue to build?
It was ridiculously hard. I had a very hard time. And I can't tell you, how do you attract people who are at least as responsible as you? Today I have, for example, Ken Berenger, who co-created Water on Demand with me. I have to tell him Saturday nights, turn off your freaking phone, dude. Stop taking my chats. No, these people will not stop. But before 2018, I had a problem, and And then somehow I started attracting, well, actually starting in 2015 with our McKinney acquisition, but started attracting good people. And I think it's almost like success gets you more. It's very hard to get good people. Now, we're going to have to ramp up fast. So what we're going to do is simply acquire companies like an engineering firm. Boom. And it's already up and running. It's operational. The person who founded it figured out how to make it work. Boom, up and running, right? So that's the other way to go. But hiring people is very hard to do. And these days also, post-COVID, there's a lot of turnover. I've noticed that, and I've talked to other people like, I had the same staff for 3 years and then all of a sudden or 15 years. And all of a sudden, a good friend of mine, he has a CPA firm, a tax preparing firm, and he said for 15 years, all I had to do was just make it so first. And then all of a sudden, he started to have all this turnover and training people and all this stuff.
It's a different world.
And it is a different world. It's a contractor-heavy world, which isn't bad by itself. There's also a lot of businesses have a problem with people working remote, which I don't. It's like, if you can handle it, go for it. We maintain a facility for people who want to show up. Some people need to. They want to get away from the family or whatever.
Always, and it always depends on the person. Depends on when they're the most creative, the most product management efficient. When do they get their best work done? Are they hitting the deadlines that they should? And that's just, again, like you said, I think COVID definitely ushered that world in. But now it's just kind of shown the spotlight a little bit more on both of those types of things, ensuring that the outcome is what we need it to be, but also providing that space, like you said, where you still have the brick store where you can go in and you can actually sit down in a conference room with people and jot ideas on a whiteboard, and you can have those creative outings. And it's not just, let's jump on a Zoom meeting, which a lot of times feels like very matter of fact, where let's jump into it, as opposed to, we're people who are working together. Let's build the rapport. It's harder to kind of build that rapport in a virtual world, as opposed to sitting down with somebody, having coffee with somebody, understanding how to work best with them, their needs and wants and your needs and wants, and how those can work.
It's true. I've always found I love the Zoom factor, and I do a lot of critical meetings that way. But when I sit down with somebody for half an hour, things come up that I had not expected. We start going beyond. So I couldn't agree more. But right now we have staff in Virginia, in Texas, here in Pinellas County, Florida, Los Angeles. It's like meetings are good up to a point, but we're dealing with that, and it's unfortunately the way it is. But I don't think these are core problems. I think the core problem is for a business owner is how to essentially constantly reinvent the company. And, things don't stay the same. They either go better or worse, right? Entropy in the physical universe means things get worse unless you do something about it. So these things decay. Things decay unless you really watch out. And, there's natural turnover of customers. Even the best operation has a certain amount of turnover, and poor operations have a very bad turnover. But so you got to think about, well, how can we continuously do more than the entropy? We got to overcome. Alice in Wonderland. You got to run just to stand still, or whatever she said.
Yeah. You're exactly right. And I love that. And I love that you kind of give that nugget to entrepreneurship and to founders that are growing and everything else. You have to constantly be thinking in those terms, because it's not going to stay static, because the competition's not going to stay static. Your team's not going to stay static. The industry, everything is changing. So how can you make sure that you're evolving with that you're bringing the team along with you, that you're leading from that place, all of those things. Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, the other factor is basically, I think you need to be guilty of overreach. Like, for example, when we bought that Texas company in 2015, my backers said, "Well, so Riggs, you're just you're going to shrink to just be that one company. And I went, no, I'm not going to be a small $4 million a year company in McKinney, Texas, that will eventually grow to 6 million. I have ambitions to make real change happen.
Yeah.
And that caused me to get into real trouble and to stay in real trouble continuously ever since then. So it's been 8 years of continuous trouble.
I love that.
But things improving, and out of necessity, you solve the problems, or else you're toast. And I wouldn't take it any other way. I'm restless that way, I guess you could say.
Well, Riggs, I love all of those things that you said. I think that that's so profound, especially for entrepreneurs, just in their mindset and the way that they approach the day-to-day, the issues that they solve, but also the main driver that their company is looking to solve. As we're wrapping up, tell people how they can follow you. I'll make sure to definitely link the book that you mentioned, everything else that we talked about. I want to make sure that people can keep up with everything OriginClear has going on, get involved, follow you, all that good stuff. So how can people keep up with you?
Okay. Well, of course, OriginClear.com is the website. And if people are interested in becoming an investor, there's a green button that says Invest Now. Of course, Facebook /OriginClear. We also, we're on Twitter, Instagram, etc., and LinkedIn. So, but here's the important part. Every Thursday night, I do a CEO briefing where basically I open the kimono and I tell it all.
Nice.
I tell it like it is for an hour. And it's not just me droning on. Believe me, I play different clips that I find interesting, like Peter Zeihan. I like this little thing. I play that. So people find it very, very interesting. It's every week, Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And there's also a replay that you get if you didn't have the time. And I strongly recommend people go to OriginClear, sign up for that, join me on my CEO briefing, and you can ask any question you want, and I will answer it.
Fantastic. I love that so much. Love it, love it. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I'll make sure all of that is linked. And again, thank you so much for your time.
David, it's been such a pleasure, and I hope your listeners get some good out of my crazy rabbit, my scared rabbit adventures, right?
I love it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like the video and comment. I love to interact. And as always, be sure to subscribe to the channel.